Cheers. Welcome back. Today we are starting section number 8. So section number 8 has to do with UI. Right now our game looks a little bit bland. It has the thing we need, it has the gameplay we need. However, we'd like to receive more information and be able to interact with the gameplay and maybe just the flow of the application without knowing that we have to swipe up or down. Like here, for example, swipe up for respawn. So buttons, all about buttons, and also all about game UI, right? So we're going to start with one very simple concept that I need to explain to you. So you have that in mind when you create your canvas here in this course, but also for your own personal game. That concept is very simple in Unity. This is Unity specific. When we create a UI object, this UI object, for example, I create an image here. This UI object has to be sitting on top of something else called a canvas. And you will realize that when you are in a canvas, it's a little bit different. So the behavior is different. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me just look at this image. Maybe we'll change the color so we can actually see it a little bit better. Or you can put your game in 2D, and that's going to give you a better idea of where this stands. When we're playing around with UI, especially under a canvas, or I should say specifically under a canvas, we are no longer using the same coordinate system. So yes, this object is sitting within the scene. However, as you can see here, all of these, they have transform. But the second we fall into UI, we are now using rect transform. And that's a whole new deal. So you'll be trying to set the position of this object, for example, on top of the player. Then you'll have to do a little bit of math. You have to use some helper function because it's not going to work right out of the gate. You're going to be trying to set this in the middle of the screen. Well, where is the middle of the screen exactly if you're in 3D world coordinate? In that case, that would be screen size and screen size dot width divided by 2, and also screen height dot width divided by 2. But you see how this is different. So do know that everything below that, so every UI element will have a rect transform, which stands for rectangle transform in this case. It also has a canvas render. So if you don't have that, it just doesn't render to canvas, and you will see that you can't remove it. That's totally fine. And then you'll have the actual UI element. This could be an image. This could be a text. Let's not play around with Test Mesh Pro just yet. We'll do that very soon, though. This can be pretty much anything in the UI object. And you'll realize that the first time we created a UI object, then we had a canvas created for us. However, the second time, if I just go somewhere else, button, it just falls back into the canvas we've had. Now, the important concept I want to talk about is the following. I'll just give you a fairly example, a really bad example maybe, but please bear with me. Try to listen as close as possible. For example, we have one canvas over here. This canvas has two images, and they are static. For example, I have a fish, and also I have the play button. These are right there, right? Once we start the engine and we decide to show this canvas, we have to render these images once. And then what's cool is that if they don't change, if they remain at the same spot, we don't call the renderer again. So we won't be redrawing this, and it's going to be good on the CPU cycle. It's going to be good on the rendering cycle, on the graphic card, on the performances of your game in general. And this is awesome because we have this canvas and we do a draw call only once. Now, if we decide to change, for example, the play icon to the shop icon at runtime, then here is what happens. Not only do we need to re-render this image, but also this one as well, because we re-render the whole canvas. And now you're starting to see that this might get tricky. For example, if our whole game UI, complete game UI, so maybe like 15 elements on our canvas are there just sitting, and then you decide to move one just a little bit towards the right like this, you re-render the whole thing, and that becomes costly very fast. So when you go now and make your game in the future, please make sure that whenever you have something that moves on the canvas, for example, you have a minimap on your canvas that you have to re-render every single frame, maybe you'll want to take that minimap and create its own canvas. There is no problem having more than one canvas. And I'll give you this example right here. You can go under UI and create a canvas and maybe call this one animated UI element. And this one could be the static elements. And here on this animated UI element, you could have something that moves every single frame, like an image that rotates, for example. So while this image rotates every single frame, we are redrawing the animated UI element canvas, but not the static element. This one, nothing has moved on it. So hey, we're not moving it at all. We're not redrawing it. We're just using what we had in the previous frame. So that is the very important distinction I wanted to make and also tell you about. We're going to be using a hybrid of that because we like our code. Well, first, our UI is not very heavy in the first place. We have very, very limited UI and it's static. And what I want to say here is that we're going to be using an hybrid in which we're going to be using multiple canvas, but we're not going to be, for example, putting something that is dynamic. We're not going to be singling it out into a single canvas. Instead, we're going to have a canvas for every single state of the game, I believe. So one canvas when we are in the idle screen, another for when we're in the game, in the dev state, in the respawn state, and in the shop. So we're going to be splitting that apart, and it's going to make our video here, the video course, much easier to follow and just to create. So I think I talked enough. Let's jump right into the action, and that's going to be in the next video. Cheers. It is now time for us to jump into making the very first piece of UI we'll have for our game. And it's going to be the very simple one. So this video should be short enough. We're going to be placing around things for the main menu or the idle screen, if we prefer to call it like that. Now, what we'll be doing is I'll create a new UI canvas. And on its own, this canvas will be the canvas for main menu. Maybe you want to split it apart with underscore, if I can write, main menu. Or that might be a bit too much. I'll just call it canvas menu. Okay, awesome. What we'll need over here is the following. So for the canvas, we are going to be using screen space overlay, which just means the 2D space on your screen. So think about pixel wide and also pixel in height. Now, the screen space camera is the exact same thing, but it uses the camera settings. For example, if we use this one, it's going to use whatever that needs to be filtered there. So if it has a different field of view, it's going to be using that instead. And I just don't like using this one at all. And then you also have a canvas for the world space. This one is quite funny because you can actually position it in the world. For example, if I am to create not a button, I'll create a full screen image. And make sure it scales on all axes. You can actually position it in the world. So as you can see here, it is actually positioned somewhere, and I can move it around in 3D space. So this one is actually quite useful for different type of effects. So if you'd like to have like a UI on top of your character that follows him around, you can actually do that here. However, not the case for us. We're going to switch back to screen space, which means it's just rendering on top of everything. Okay. Now that being said, we can head down to Canvas Scaler. How is the canvas going to scale our UI? And again, for one more reference, I'll actually put, for example, I put something at the top left, like so. So an image that is 100 by it's 100 by 100, but it has this very specific offset. And let's do, for example, the shop icon. If we are to modify this, the UI scale mode, it is going to scale depending on one of these three parameters. So do we want to have constant pixel size, which means it's always going to remain the same exact pixel size. So you'll see this behavior when you modify the size of your preview screen, just like I'm doing right now. So if you're playing on a smaller phone, the image is still going to be as big as you would expect it to be. Now, that's an option. Or would you like the image to go smaller depending on the size of your screen? You can also do that with scale with screen size. So as you can see, as I scale down, the image also scales down. And finally, constant physical size, which means if I say to this icon, you're going to be 2 centimeter wise, it's actually going to be 2 centimeter wise all the time. For a game, you probably guessed it, we're going to be using scale with screen size, and that's the case for pretty much everything on the market, almost. There is a couple of exceptions, however. And remember that you are not locked to this decision. So if you do have a different canvas that needs constant physical size, then you can also have that just create another canvas, right? But for us, the menu, we're going to be using scale with screen size, and we're also going to be defining what is the base size of our screen. So I'll give you an example. If we're making a game for iPhone X, in portrait mode, we will be using 1125 by 2436. That is the actual resolution of the iPhone 10, which looks something like that. Makes me realize that it's quite a wide screen now, but you'll want to be inputting it right here. So 1125, 2436. Okay. So that being said, you have another option when you scale with screen size, and it's that, are you going to match with the height or the width? You can do a small 0.5 here if you're not too sure. It's going to decide which one is the driving factor. Now, if you have a set aspect ratio like I do, like I always use, say, what is I think it's 9 by 16 or something like that, then that ain't gonna matter much because you scale with both width and height at the same time. But if you are in free aspect and you decide, hey, you're gonna match only with width, then as I pull this, you're gonna see it get wider. But if I go down like so, it doesn't move because we're only matching with height. For us, we're going to be matching at 0.5, but we're also going to be locking our game to this very specific resolution. If you're curious, when I do develop for mobile, I usually have two screens. I have the iPhone 10 portrait, but I also have the iPad at the same time. So I'm playing around with these different resolution, and also usually I do have a layout for that, but I switch in between these two. Okay. That being said, I believe we're set here, and we can move on to actually creating our canvas. So very simple. What I do plan for this game is that the splash screen will be in 3D space, and all I'll need on here is four different type of, actually four top level item. One text that display the high score, one text that display the amount of collectible I have, one button for play, and also one button for the shop. So let's deep dive into these four. So we are going to create the play button. That's the first thing we'll do. And to do that, I'll right click on canvas menu and I'll actually choose button, just like so. Now the button is quite small. It's in the middle of nowhere. Don't worry about that. It's time for us to fix it. For the reference, I wanted to have my my UI at the bottom right of the screen. So somewhere around here, I'd like to see my UI pop up, and I just want to have a simple, very simple square so I can have enough space at the top here for the splash screen, and I'll position my penguin here on the left-hand side. So we look at him and we have the UI on the right. Maybe my camera placement is not too good, but we can fix that in the future. So if I want to put my button anchored here and good for all resolution, I will have to actually modify his anchor. So clicking on this play button, which I'll rename, I will choose the anchor and I'll just make sure to left click here and also shift left click. So it also moves the anchor. I can now put that on 0 and you'll see my button is over there. In terms of width, let's go for something tad smaller. So maybe 400 by 200. That might be too big. Maybe something like this. That looks like a pretty slick button. Of course, I'll have to play around with the size until it works fine. And maybe I'll want to put my anchor at the bottom right instead and give it an offset in Y. So for example, I'll have something like this. Now this is satisfying to me in terms of the placement. I can now move on to the second element, which is the image. And I believe I do have some images I can use here. Button number 2. They might have changed by the time that because I'm not so satisfied with them, they might have changed by the time you receive this package and you download the asset of the course. but do note that it would be called button as well. So button 1 or button 2, just use the one that looks the best to you. And I'll go ahead and we have that here. Okay, awesome. We don't need to hook anything in there as of right now. Eventually we will have to. But let's go ahead and remove the text. Next up, what I'd like to create is some sort of text inside of the play background, you could say, and then also create an image next to it. So we'll start with the image. That's going to be the icon. Take the icon, I'll use this play button right here. And I'll want to anchor this one on the left-hand side. So I'm holding Shift, then clicking on left mouse button, and I'm just going to move that to 0. So it looks something like that at the moment. Give it a proper offset, maybe 50. And next up, create a UI. I'd like to use the Text Mesh Pro. If you want to use the Text Mesh Pro, you'll have to import the TMP Essential. Click on that button. We'll revisit Text Mesh Pro in optional video here, but it now has become the standard text to use when you're using Unity. So that's why we use it, and it has a lot more feature than the previous one. And now with text, it's quite it's not too difficult, but you have to get around on how it works. So for example, here, the yellow zone is where you can input the text, and you cannot really overflow that unless you tell it that you can. So here it says overflow. You can also make sure that it's ellipsis. You can have a mask. You can have all of that. In our case, we might want to truncate here. Or what we'll do, we'll just make text that doesn't overflow. So that's also an option. Now, what I like to do with my text is just give it the whole size of the container. So for example here, to give it the whole size, I left click on the anchor preset at the bottom right, and I just put everything back on 0, which now leaves me with a text that is the whole screen, the whole button. And then I'll move my left anchor just so it's next to this button, like so. I'll give it a value that is rounded up, so 170 in this case. I'll type in what I need, so play, maybe in all caps. Tell the alignment that I'd like to have it in the center, not the center like so, but the center here. And then maybe just play with the size a tad bit. So it's not big enough. That might be big enough, but we might want to modify this to be a little bit further. So something like so. And we'll want to come back and play around with the font as well in the future. But as of right now, this is going to be our first button. I'll go ahead and I'll copy paste this and type in shop here. We'll move this, we'll move this down by roughly 300. So we're at 800 minus 300. Here we are at 500. And I'll go ahead and I'll modify the icon for the shop icon and the text for shop. So I'm starting to realize here that this actually is quite small. So maybe you'll want to play with the size a little bit more. So for example, 600 by 200. I'll apply the same here. So 600 by 200. And there's nothing there's nothing stopping you. I like to make everything very, very flush, but there's nothing stopping you from just moving this outside manually as well if you think it looks better. And then next up, we'd like to create some text for dynamic text later on, so for the high score, but also for the amount of collectibles we have. So here, I'll use a new Text Mesh Pro, and that's going to be for the high score. And we'll position that very similar to how we position the text. So you know what? I'll just copy this rect transform, apply it to my other rect transform, and now it took this spot. I'll go ahead and I'll just maybe position it here, make sure it has a rounded number. Yep, it does. I want this one to be a bit smaller, so maybe 75. Anchor it roughly at 950. And make sure my font size is big, and also my alignment is at the bottom. And I can type in something like high score X, which of course will modify at runtime. Now that's pretty good. I'll take this one, copy it, and have the fish count. So I'll just call this one fish. Put it exactly on top of the shop. So let's see, 650 in this case. And I'm pretty much satisfied with the result of this experience. Now, of course, it does not actually look very good at the moment. And most of the problem we have with this UI is the font. The font is really not playing so good with the assets, and maybe the background I want to change as well. So these will be two things we will be addressing in the future. I wanted to make sure we had a video that just looked at how we placed UI around. Now understand that we have not hooked any logic to that. It's something we'll do directly in the next video. And then after that, we will merge both the visual part and also the coding part in one, and we'll go much faster. So this one, I understand this video was quite boring for most of you that played around with the UI. But do note that the next one are going to be much faster, and we're going to be hooking the code directly at the same time. So that being said, we will revisit the UI later on when we talk about fonts, but at the moment, this looks pretty good for a MVP, not MVP, for a first draft, you could say. So thank you guys, and I will see you in the next one. In the previous segment, we've laid down the visual for the canvas of the menu of the canvas actually. And it was made out of 4 elements: the play button, the shop, the high score, and also the fish count, which we can see right here on the screen. Today, what we're going to do is take these and actually hook some logic to it. And the way we're going to do so is that for every single canvas we also have a associated game state. For example, this is canvas menu, or I could have called it canvas initialize instead. That might have been a little bit easier to understand because it is matching the game state that is called initialize. So what I was thinking about in the architecture of this game was to actually link these two together. So create one state for every single canvas. It's just the way that I'd like it to be. So these two can be linked. And also codeways they can be linked is what I'm trying to say. So whenever we have logic regarding these button, or for example, the high score has to be updated, we would like to put it inside of the following script. So the game state initialize script. As you can see, we actually ended off the game flow section with not much logic in there, and that's because I wanted to make the logic of the UI in there as well. So that's not it. So we'll definitely have more than just that, obviously. So that being said, it is what we're going to open up today. So the game state initialize over here, and we're going to hook in the action of these buttons to it. So for that, we will need a function for play button and for the high score. Sorry, no, the play button and also the shop. So when we click on these two, something happens. So we're going to start off with a public void and make sure those are public because we'll need to link the buttons to it. So that means we'll need to access them during, not during, but in the inspector. So public void on game click or on play click would make a tad more sense in this case. So when we press on the play button. Same thing down here for on shop click. And we can just lay down the brackets and start writing down our function. Over here in the update state, we were looking to change over to the state game. That is no longer true. We're actually not going to need the update logic anymore. And instead, we will take this line of code and put it inside of the play because that's what happened when you play. And that's pretty much all we need in there for the moment, at least. And the same thing would be true for the on shop click. So something like that. However, we don't have a game state for the shop at the moment. No, we don't. So let's just write it like so and comment it out. It's something we'll have to come back to. Until then, let's just write a debug.log and say shop button has been clicked. I can include Unity Engine to make sure this works. So here at the top. And that's actually all we need. It's not much more code, and actually we remove a good chunk of it, but we also need one more thing. There is that UI, the famous canvas we've made. We'll need a reference to it, and we'll also need a reference to the high score and also the fish count text, because those will need to be populated. So let's lay that down right here. We'll start with a public game object menu UI. A public, or we can make this one serializable, but yeah, maybe serialize field, private text mesh pro, UGUI. That's actually the type of the, since I'm not using regular type, sorry, not regular type, but regular text, I'm actually using Text Mesh Pro, and the full name of that component that displays the text, you'll see it in a second when I click on it, is Text Mesh Pro dash text UI. And in the code, it's actually translated as, and you can see it here, so maybe edit this script. It's actually Text Mesh Pro UGUI. So that's the name of the class, and that's what we'll be using. So going back here, I'll need a reference to Text Mesh Pro UGUI, and that won't pop up until you have the using TMP Pro at the top here. So make sure you include that. We'll do the high score text, copy that over, and that will be the fish count text. All right. Now all of this will be set in the start. We will start with text. Do note that we don't have reference to the high score at the moment, but don't worry, we'll input that later. I'll just say, should I write high score like so, or high score? See, I get confused with that word. If I read it this way, I also remember that high score was written this way in RuneScape. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it high score like so. Okay, so we'll put the GH actually in there. That's a mistake from being a French native speaker, so sorry about that. And for the moment, because we don't have that, I'll just write TBD like so. So high score plus TBD. Eventually, this is going to be replaced by a int value. Same thing down here for the fish count. So fish count, fish. Do we write fishes? I don't actually know. Let's just write fish. I don't think there is fishes. Okay, so now I could really use an English major, but yeah, okay. So once we have all of that, here's what we do next. We make sure to enable the menu UI. So set active is going to be set to true once we enter this state. That would also mean that we have to disable it when we leave. So public override void, void destruct, and we're going to call this line, but instead of true, of course, we'll type in false. And that will be, once we assign these directly in the inspector, that will be it, I believe. So let's give this a try. I'm going to head back to my game manager, drag and drop my menu UI, which is the whole canvas actually. High score text is right here. Fish is right here. The play button, we have to click on it, head down to button. The on-click list has to be appended. Drag and drop the game manager into game state initialize on play click. So that whole flow is quite complicated. Let's do it again. We click on shop. Under button, we append the event list called onClick, drag and drop the game manager because it's the one that contains the game state initialize script on it. And I just lost. Okay, there it is. We drag and drop game manager, and then we find the game state initialize class and on shop click like so. And just like that, we have a full UI loop. And something important as well is that you actually disable the canvas initialize at the beginning. Let's see if when we enter the state, it actually puts it on screen. So as I press on play, we have this behavior. We have lots of error coming from something completely different. And also we have the play button, which doesn't seem to do anything right now. And that is because the UI, not the UI, sorry, the event system, which came with our UI, is actually using the old input module. As you can see here, the standalone input module. Let's replace it with the new input system. There is a button right here. Did you just have to click? You don't even have to look at what's inside of there. Let's collapse that down, press play again. And there we go. So no error. We are going to drag and drop, not drag and drop, sorry. We're going to click on play. And as you can see, then the game starts playing. And it's not because we tapped on the screen, because if we tap on the screen anywhere, it's not going to do anything. And when we click on shop button has been clicked. High score has been changed to high score TBD. Fish has been changed to fish TBD. So our UI right here is ready. And that was the very first one. Quite simple stuff. And as I've mentioned in the previous video, as we move forward and we make those other canvases for the other states of the game, we're going to be doing it in one single video, and we're going to be going a little bit quicker. So I hope you understood well what this one entailed, and we can then move on to completing this UI in a good amount of time. It's quite easy. So see you in the next one. Cheers. Hey, welcome back. Now we're going to head into making the canvas for the game scene, which should be quite a simple one. We don't need much things in there. So let's go ahead, right click, new canvas. Make sure it's not a object under the initialized canvas. We are on the game canvas now. So to make sure I have the same settings, I'll just open this one, copy the canvas scalar, go over here and paste it. It's something quite important. Don't forget about doing that. The canvas itself stays the way it is. Next up, we are going to head into the canvas game and create ourselves. What I need is I'll need two pieces of background, and then on top of that, I'll need to display some information. So it ain't gonna be that complicated. You'll see. We will start with a fish count. So again, we're going to be displaying the amount of fishes we have, and it's something that we'll use background 1 or background 2, or you could call it button 1 or button 2. And I think I'll use this one now. So button 2 is a little bit darker. I'll anchor it at the top left. That's cool. In terms of size, don't want to have something that's too big because it's not really important information, but still relevant to have on the screen. And I'll anchor this, say roughly minus 150 or 100. So it's at the top, like so. Yeah, so this works. I'll copy that. This one is going to be the score. So we'll be displaying the score, but this time I'll anchor it on the other side, and it's going to look like that. Okay, now inside of there, I will right click, add a new image, and that will be my fish icon. So this fish icon, make sure I use the preserve aspect so I get the proper scaling, and then I can move it over to the left side. Maybe I want to make this a little bit bigger, like so. Since I'm on preserve aspect, it's also going to make it look a little bit bigger on the other axis as well, which is totally fine. And then next to it, once we're done configuring this, we can head into the text. So I'll right click, add a new text mesh pro once more. Let's do bold text, really huge font, so maybe 80. And let's try to input a couple of digits in there. So as I like to do with text, I just like to scale on all the axes. Then just give it a proper offset. So for example here, just next to the fish, like so. And then I can play with the alignment so it looks exactly where it should be. And what else could we do? We could lower down the fish just a tiny bit, like so. Okay, rest is going to be the font and maybe just the scaling of things. Maybe you want to make this a little bit wider or so. To make sure my text isn't too big, so in case somebody has a lot of fishes, maybe I'll want to input the auto sizing. So yeah, the feature for auto sizing here, and that will make me drag this as well on this side. So maybe something of the sort will do the job. Now it's cool because auto size is going to not position, but it's gonna make sure your text is a good size no matter what the situation is. So for example, if we have multiple zeros, this should not happen actually. This should be on the another line. Now, one thing to note with auto size is if you have two words, for example, like this, if we go and we put a little X in front, you're gonna receive this type of behavior, which is not really cool. You can lower down the size of the top if you like to put a space, or even better, and what I'll do is I'll just make it one word. And now you can scale up as much as you want. And since it's one word, it's forced on one specific line. So I'll go with this option here because it looks good on both the axes. And most of the time, people are going to have a score like 10 or so, which will allow me to lower this down to maybe 400 again. Okay. Now, the other side, in terms of score, is just going to be one text. So I'll copy my text over to the other side, so to the score. Make sure I anchor it at the proper place, do a bunch of resizing, maybe turn off auto size, alignment in the middle, or alignment on the right-hand side, maybe. And your score could be something like that. Yeah. And that will do the job. So there's really nothing else to do in here. There ain't much in the scene for the game, which is totally fine because a lot of happen like a lot often happens if you actually die. So that's going to pop up another canvas completely, which will give you the option to go to respawn or watch an ad or do all that kind of stuff. So for the game scene and the game state, there ain't much left to do at this point. But just like we did with the other one, we'll have to go ahead and input a couple of things in the game state game. Now, the things we'll need is the text. So serialize field. I believe this is part of system, so that's why we're not getting any. Let me check. Probably mistyped it. So using system. Oh, my bad. It's part of Unity Engine. So using Unity Engine, and then I can go down here and say serialized field. Private text mesh Pro UGY, and this is going to be the fish count. This is going to be the score count, and finally we'll need one more, a public game object, and that's going to be the game UI. Now, as we've done earlier for the other one, so the game state for initialize, we are going to set the UI active or inactive. So I'll go down here, I'll copy my code from the other one, and here's what I'll do. So game UI set active in the construct and game UI set active false in the destruct. If we give this a try, and we assign the values. So for example, here I have canvas game, game manager, canvas game. I'll assign the fish count. Text, just make sure you grab the text part of it. And the canvas game as the game UI. Now I can disable this. Start. We have my first UI. Click here. We have my second UI. Okay. Now the only thing left to do is to actually set these number here at the top. To do so, at the moment, I'll go and I'll do the following. So I'll do fish count is going to be equal to x TBD. So to be determined. Oh, sorry, dot text. And I'll also do the same thing for score count because we're not updating any type of score at the moment, which is totally fine. We can come back here in the future. But at least the code is going to be in there and we're going to have a preview of how to use it, which is quite simple. Giving it one more try before we close this loop. And here we go. So the text was modified at the top and we have what we need. All right. So I'm thinking about maybe dropping this down here. I feel like this is encroaching the space of where I should be looking, but it's a decision that if you want to do, it's quite simple to change. So I do invite you to modify it as much as you wish. Next up, we're going to have the def menu. So stay tuned. It's directly in the next video. See you there. Welcome back to the UI section. We are now making the hardest piece of UI, which is going to be the def screen. The reason it's going to be the hardest is because we have a lot of logic in there regarding, in the future, it's going to be regarding ad. But today, it's all going to be about UI, and also there's going to be an animation in that UI. I'll explain you real quick what the goal of this UI is. One is to display the amount of fish you obtained during this game session. Quite simple. Display your score. Also quite simple. Display the high score. Simple. And then two buttons. One of them will put you back in the main menu. And the other one, however, is going to be a timed button. So you'll have a certain amount of time to click it to revive your player. And that's going to be where the bunch of the logic is going to be today. Now we will start by creating a Text Mesh Pro UI. That's going to be the high score at the very top. So that will just display the high score. Something that already exists, and we're just going to put some arbitrary number for the moment. I'd like to have something that is quite big in size, so maybe 60 in size of the font. Let's have a look. Yep, this looks, I don't want it to be too big, but this looks like a good amount of information that we can have. And I'm not going to place this as of right now because I want to show you something. So next up will be an image, and that's just going to be a background. And then on top of that will be, for example, our current score. So I want this to be quite big. So maybe 800 by 200 or 300. And then I'll just put the score on top of that. Okay, so the way I'd like this to happen is I'd like to have the high score on top, the image there, and then we just keep going down in that direction for the UI. And we can ensure that this is actually fine on all device resolution, and we can actually ensure that um, it's all constant everywhere. That's what I'm trying to say. So what we could do, we could take the high score, say, hey, you have an anchor at the top. You're going to be at minus 200, and you have 15 height. So this image is going to be also anchor at the top, 250. And this, actually, let me fix that, 250. And we can go down like that and just keep remembering. But then if we decide to make this a tad smaller, then it just messes up everything else, and it's not good. So there is a component in Unity that will let us fix this issue or help us with this issue. And on the canvas itself, I will add a vertical layout group. And this is actually going to take care of split my object apart. Right now, it's splitting them half and half. So every object beneath canvas depth has half of the screen for themselves. Not the behavior you would like to find, but hey, that's at least that's a start. So right here on this vertical layout group, I will uncheck child force expand and child force height. And I will also make sure that my anchor is at upper center. Now like this, all the UI is going to move depending on the sizing that I give it. So for example here, I want this image, well, I want this text to be roughly 75 and maybe have a font size of also, no, I'm not going to say 75 here. Let me just adjust the width real quick. Well, let me just quickly adjust the width here so it's the same as the button, 800, because I'd like to have this anchor on the left side here. Maybe down there as well. What I can do is I can give it a padding on the top side, and that's just going to put down everything, like everything beneath this point is going to put down. Okay, now do note that this vertical layout group does not affect children of children. So right now we have the high score, we have an image that we're going to call score, and then we can put a text in there, and this one will not be affected because it's not directly on the same level. So as we like to do, anchor it on all the axes. Now I wonder why this is not being rendered right now, but there is text on top of that. Okay, so I don't know why it didn't work prior to this. Maybe you guys can point it out if you see the difference, but this text does not really care at all about being rendered on top of this object. However, if I take this high score and I copy it in here, that is not a problem. It will fit perfectly fine. So I just took this high score and I'm going to center it on both axes and type in some sort of score. Can make the font size quite bigger. This one should be the obvious one, so a lot bigger, yep. And let's give this maybe a bold, not italic, but bold is enough. And that would be your score for this game. Okay, now the next step I'd like to do is say how many fishes I've gotten during this game, this session. And the way I'm going to do it is with another panel like so, but a smaller one. And I'll just call it fish. It's going to be the same exact behavior here where we are going to have a panel and behind it a button, sorry, a text. Now you're going to realize that this one, I don't want to have it as big as it is, so I'll just split it in two. So 400 here and 150 here. Obviously my font is way too big. I'll go ahead and I'll modify that. And my fish count will be displayed here. And one issue that I have here is that I'd like these to be apart. And if I am to drag and drop this like somewhere else, I can't move it on the y-axis. That's because the vertical layout group is taking care of that. It's actually taking care of positioning these. And that's not something I'd like for this very specific case. So what you can do when you have this kind of behavior, you can create an empty game object and just slide it in between here and give it the height that you wish. And then you have the desired result, which is quite good. So I'm going to move down everything just quickly. Maybe 300 is good. My fish count is going to be right there. There's going to be a spacer, I like to call it, and then we're going to have another spacer, and then here we will add a big play button or replay button in this case. So I'll create a new image, actually, sorry, a new button. That button will have an image component on it. This one will be the play, actually will be a background and then the play button. So maybe make this 250 by 250. On top of it, I'll create a new image, the play button, scale it that bigger, so 150, 150, why not? Play icon, that's good. We'll add a on-click event later on. And then where the biggest part of the UI will be is down there. So we'll put another spacer in between. And we will input something quite big here. So I'm thinking about making a circle, and I might not have the asset for that at the moment, but we'll get to that when we need it. So maybe in the asset pack that you have that you've downloaded, this one exists. It could be like a circle, but at the moment I'll use the default one for Unity, so knob. And inside of that knob, I will add the revive icon. So I'll head over to UI, image. My icon is going to be this penguin that has wings because he is reviving. Make it roughly, well, I'll make it quite big actually. And what I do plan on doing here is having a revive button like so, and then the image component, as time goes, will be, I believe it's called filled, and will be going like this, like a timer. And if you don't click on it fast enough, you will lose a chance to revive. Know that this will be also linked to an ad, so it incentivizes people to click on it because it has a certain cooldown. You want to act fast because you don't have much time to make a decision, and there's going to be an ad link to it, which would lead to more clicks and more revenue for your game, obviously. So maybe this one is another one I want to modify. So the first knob here is just going to be an image, and then beneath the revive button, we will have another of that image, so UI image as well, with the knob. I'll make it big, so maybe, but big, but not as big as the last one. So maybe this type here. I'll change the color for the moment so we can see the difference. Oops. Here. And then what I'll do, as time goes down, I'll just move this like so. Okay. So this is the behavior that I intend to have for this button. And now it is time for us to start implementing the rest. So let me just put that on a green, actually. You know what? Let's do two things. It's going to go from green to red. Yeah, okay. That seems like a good idea. So we'll do that right now because we don't have any other assets. That's the logic we're trying to have within this. The canvas def is pretty much dead. Not dead, sorry. Done. And we can now head into coding this piece of software. Oh, and I forgot something. I see that there's like, you have the high score over here, your current score. I'd also like to put the total fish count. Why not? This seems like a good add. So I'll copy my high score, put it over my fish, make sure this one has the same size. So wait, fish count, actually fish total. This one is 400, so this one is also going to be 400. Smaller size, obviously. And we can type it like so, so total, and then type in a certain amount here. Okay, so that's going to be just additional logic, but it makes a lot of sense to me. Good. So with this in mind, we now have the visual we need, and it's now time to head over to the game manager, game state, def, and start coding all of that, which is going to be the biggest pain point for now. Let's start as we do usually with the game object for the UI. So public game object, and we'll need to include Unity Engine, of course. Call it def UI. We're going to follow this with the two text field we have. Actually, we have four. So private text mesh pro UGY, and we will call this one, I believe this one was the high score. Current score is going to be the next one. Fish total, and then fish current or current fish. Now, on top of that, we will need more field for the logic where the circle goes down and also changes color. So here we'll need some completion circled field. And those will be the following. So we're going to start with a serialized field, private image. Image is the type in the Unity Engine.ui. So make sure you include Unity Engine.ui. We'll call it completion circle. We are going to follow this with, for example, we could be using a public float time to decision. So how long do we give our user before he has to decide? We could go with something quite fast, 2.5 seconds. So actually, the lower this is, the more likely they will click unless they don't know what they're clicking on. So obviously, you have to find a sweet space here. We'll need a private float to know when we actually die, so def time. And I think that's all we need at the moment. I'm not quite sure, but yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and implement this. As we did with all the other UI, we're going to start by enabling it. So def UI set active true. Since we're here, let's not forget to disable it in a destruct. So override destruct. And we set active to false. The next thing we'll do is set all our text. So high score, current score, fish total, current fish. All of these, we need to set these. And they're all text mesh pro objects. So they all require the dot text. And that's going to be equal to, what did we type in actually? We typed in high score total. Okay, cool. Let's do that again. So high score, TBD. Current score is going to be highest. It's actually going to be a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fish total, total 2 dot TBD. And the current fish will be maybe something like 20, so a smaller number. So let's go with something like that. And I'll just put like exclamation mark in front of it, not a question mark in front of it to know that it's temporary data. Okay, so we've set all the text. We have done the, we've shown the UI, we've set the text. Now it's time to look at the complex logic behind completion circle. And to be honest, it's really not that complex. We just have to use the update state, which we were actually using in the past, of course, for swiping down when we go to menu or swiping up when we resume the game. Well, don't be afraid. Now this is gone. We have other things for these, and we can remove them completely from the update state. We'll come back to these two functions in a bit. But for the moment, let's have a look at the circle. We are going to do the following. We're going to calculate a ratio that will be the time that it is currently right now, minus the time we've died, which we've been doing quite a lot in this course. It's basically to tell you how long has it been since the second output, so the time here. How long has it been since we've died? If we divide that by the time to decision, that will give us a ratio on how far we are in the decision-making process on a scale of 0 to 1. Now what we can do is actually play with the color. So the completion circle dot color could be a lerp, so color dot lerp, in between a say color dot green and also a color dot red. The lerp is going to be the ratio. So at the end, we're going to say, okay, it's 0.5. If it's 0.5, it's going to be in between green and red, exactly in between. Next up, we also have to change the fill amount to 1 minus the ratio. That will give us the disappearing logic behind it. And now, If that ratio goes beyond 1, it means we kind of have to disable this. So I'd like to do completion circle, game object, set active, false. And this way we can actually hide the button. They miss their chance. And maybe you want to add an animation on there because it's going to disappear way too fast, but don't worry about that at the moment. Do we have everything we need? I believe we pretty much do have everything we need except the 2 hooks to these resume button and also to menu. So it's going to be very important for us to go back in the engine and actually set all of these. Quite a lot of stuff. So we're going to start with the def UI, followed by the high score, the text within here, which I'll just call score. Oops, I lost it. The fish total, current fish. Forgot to rename my assets, something quite important to do. And finally, the completion circle, which in this case, which one would it be? I believe it would be this one on top. Yeah. So the revive icon. We can drag and drop in right here. But it's not over. We actually have to do more than that. This revive icon here needs to be a button as well. So I know we have an image here, but we also need to add the button component, which we can then head on, go on the on click, add the game manager on top of that once more, find the game site def, and that will be not to menu, that will be a resume game here because we're resuming the current game, we're reviving the player. Let's head on the play button. Again, add the manager in there. And this is the to menu. So giving this a try. Oh, first we forgot to disable the canvas def. So let's make sure we disable it. Press play. And I hope we didn't forget about anything. Well, as I die, I don't know if you guys saw, but it was quite fast. All the text had changed, however, so that's good. Okay, so we have a problem here in which we didn't set the def timer, so that's totally normal. The behavior just did. We need to set the def time in the constructor. So def time is going to be time.time. And then I believe we're going to be fine. So let's hit play. Run into a wall. Then we have 2.5 seconds to click on this, and then I missed it because I'm quite bad. Let's play again. And it's no longer there. Oh, because we disabled it in the past, that's why. So we're gonna have to re-enable this thing once we construct. So let's make sure that this completion circle is enabled here as well. So set active, back to true. Okay, let's hit play once more. Now we're gonna run 2 and die. Let's just hit resume. It puts us in the revive state. And again, which is totally fine at the moment. We might want to limit that to 1 once we start playing ads, so people don't abuse this to get high score. And if I am to play again in the same session, technically this button should still be here. Yep. So I'll let it disappear, click play, hit the rock again, and it's here. Okay, so the whole flow of this works. Now, obviously, all the tags are not set because we don't have these value. We don't have a score being calculated. We don't have fishes being collected, but the UI is in place and is ready to take all of this. And we can now navigate in between these without any problem. The only thing we can't do at the moment is, of course, the shop. So it's something we'll be tackling quite later on in later stage. We'll put the collectible in there first. We'll make sure we have saving logic before we do any of that, but see it as some sort of add-on to the game. Until then, we're going to keep working on this and making this look a little bit better every time we tackle a new task. So guys, thank you so much for watching this section. It's not the last time we do UI. We're going to go back to make the shop, obviously. We're going to make a splash screen, but we have all we need right now in terms of functional UI. So I'll see you in the next section.